Greetings, brothers and sisters. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome once again to our Imagination show. It's been a little bit rough, just trying to get everything moving this evening. I've had a few things kind of going wrong. I'm really just trying to familiarize myself with the modern technology, but I hope that you can all see me and that you can hear me clearly. And once again, it's a great honor and a tremendous privilege to have the opportunity to be with you again today. This is our second installment of the Imagination show, and I'm very much looking forward to sharing and spending some time with you. I'm not sure whether or not I'm going to be able to use some of the images that I have that I really want to use today. But as I said, I'm just feeling my way, getting used to the process. And so greetings and welcome. Those of you who don't know me, my name is Brother Leo Muhammad. And as I said, I'm very excited about doing these shows. They've been a long time coming. And, I want to really just share with you some of the information that I've learned over many years, and that people really, in a world like this, people should know about, but unfortunately, a lot of our people don't know because, I don't know with us as Black people, whether we appreciate the kind of forces that we're up against, and the fact that these forces are constantly trying to suppress the reality of who we are, what our true record is in terms of, our existence. And so oftentimes we have to come in the public and try to reveal things that should be common knowledge and that people should just know about automatically. And so, that's what a lot of us find ourselves doing, sharing with the public things that the public really ought to already know, but in many instances don't know. So our subject today is really looking at the history, in truth, of the Million Man March. Today's Thursday, the 14th of October, which marks 26 years since October the 16th, 1995, which became known as the Holy Day of Atonement, Reconciliation and Responsibility, and even more famously, the Million Man March. Now, the Million Man March was the largest ever gathering of Black men called by one man, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. And that took place against all the odds on a Monday. It's the most profound, the most powerful, the most beautiful thing that took place in the 20th century in the world. There is no other gathering of men, in particular Black men, that comes anywhere close to what happened on October the 16th, 1995. Yet, like I said, as far as the media is concerned, you would think that nothing ever happened, and you would wonder why such a momentous event has not been properly documented and shown and celebrated. It is because of what it really means, such an event, and just how powerful that was, and the message that it sent to the powers that be, who really want to keep us as a people in a particular type of condition. And so, on that day, you're talking about in excess of 1 million. The various counts have been given, but we believe that there was nearly 2 million men who showed up in Washington on that day. And so this is what we really wanted to take a look at today as we go a little bit further into our program. October the 16th, 1995, it was on and around the streets of the National Washington Mall in Washington, D.C. The media literally did everything within its formidable power to play down the significance, the justification, and the necessity for the event called by a Black man who, of course, they'd already vilified and slandered for years without any just cause. But because of the truth that he carries in his mouth, they had to, again, as I said, really try to hide this event. But of course, it was impossible to hide it. And some of us were very blessed to be able to really see it and to participate on the day itself and to really feel the energy of that tremendous, that absolutely powerful day. Now, both then and now, the media, the powers that be have attempted to lessen the impact of the march on America and also the peoples of the world who were also watching, because, you know, there were various types of media that are not part of the so-called mainstream media. And in particular, you know, some of the slander and the defamation against the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and the march literally came from the President of the United States with deliberate attempts to separate the man who called the march, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, from the actual powerful reasons and the message of the march. That was their main thing, to try to, they knew they couldn't stop the march, so let's try to separate the message from the messenger. On the same day, October 16th, 1995, President Bill Clinton left the White House in Washington, D.C. And coincidentally and ironically, he went to the University of Texas, Austin, to give a speech on what? Race relations and the challenge that faced America on ending racial discrimination. Now, you know, what a coincidence. It was really abundantly clear from the content and tone of Bill Clinton's speech that the Million Man March could not be ignored or dismissed because of the social, political, economic, and even unnervingly for the powers that be, the religious impact and ramifications such a day would have on America and the wider world. After all, this was primarily a call made by a Muslim leader, you know, with well over 1 million, mostly Christians, responding. Bill Clinton started his speech by reassuring his audience that he was hopeful about America. You know, he's very hopeful about America. He stated that he was there to deal with the thorny issue of race. He acknowledged that white Americans and Black Americans saw the world in starkly different ways, using the recent example of the O.J. Simpson trial, for those of you who can remember that, where white people and Black people really responded in, you know, very, very different ways to the outcome of that particular trial. People were completely at odds. The two groups of people, the Black and the white, you know, in how they received the verdict of not guilty at the end of the O.J. Trial for the alleged murder of his ex-wife, Nicole Brown Simpson, and her friend, Ron Goldman. President Clinton talked about Martin Luther King and his dream. Of course, they always have to bring up the dream. He talked about the long promised, but as yet unfulfilled struggle for full voting rights for Black people. He talked about historical marches by Black people and the march 30 years before, with the one that was led by Martin Luther King, when Black men held up placards which read, "I am a man." Then he moved on to talking about the Million Man March taking place in Washington, D.C. at the same time and on the very same day that he's making this speech in Texas. He stated that the march of 30 years before and the Million Man March happening today had the same aims, objectives, and dignity, which he agreed with. But then he had the audacity and the temerity to basically cut and paste the beautiful and powerful theme and subject matter of the Million Man March, namely atonement, reconciliation, and responsibility, saying how much he agreed with the message of the march before going on to try and separate the message from the messenger, as we said before. William Jefferson Clinton said, and I quote, this is what he said: "Of course, some of those in the march do have a history that is far from its message of atonement and reconciliation. 1 million men are right to be standing up for personal responsibility, but 1 million men do not make right one man's message of malice and division." It was actually quite beautiful, because I remember on the day of the Million Man March, when the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan addressed the crowd of brothers who were there, he acknowledged what Clinton had been saying. Obviously, somebody had given the minister the information, and the minister really put him right in terms of the slander and the continued type of defamation, basically, that was being attributed, that they were trying to suggest that the minister was some person who is just full of malice and division, as if America was unified before the minister's birth, or that at some point in the distant past, America was this utopia, this beautiful place that didn't begin with the enslavement of our people, the enslavement of our ancestors. So Clinton continues in his remarks. He says, "No good house was ever built on a bad foundation. Nothing good ever came out of hate." And, again, it always makes me laugh when I listen to these people talking about hate. I remember during his tenure in the White House, how it was alleged that somebody had committed some infraction. I think it was in Ethiopia. And at the drop of a hat, Clinton was sending cruise missiles into Ethiopia. And in fact, what they ended up doing was blowing up a milk manufacturing plant, or a milk factory. This was his retaliation. Kind of reminds me again of, the recent debacle in Afghanistan, when it was alleged that a particular group was responsible for the atrocity that took place outside of the Bagram airport, I think it was. And then the retaliation came from America. Some missiles again were sent, and they said, "Oh yeah, we killed the ISIS-K perpetrators," only for it to come out later and to be revealed that again they were basically killing innocent men, women, and children who had nothing whatsoever to do with any type of attack against American personnel or anybody else outside of that airport on that day. So, I just wonder sometimes, in truth, in 2021, how many of us, when listening to the news and listening to some of these so-called politicians and some of these commentators, just how much store do we place in their words? Because we really ought not to listen to these people, because so much of what they say is blatantly untrue, blatant lies, blatant misrepresentations, but they say it so well. They say it with a straight face, and they say it in that genteel manner that the enemy has developed. They say it wearing a beautiful suit and a tie and all the rest of it. And so, I don't know, maybe not the younger generation today, maybe, I don't know, but I wonder how many of our people still listen keenly to these people when they open their mouth, because, you know, in my humble opinion, if you want to know when a politician is lying, just when he opens his mouth, basically, because so much of what they say is just blatantly untrue. And so Clinton goes on, let us pray today that all who march and all who speak will stand for atonement, reconciliation, or responsibility, unquote. You know, you see, the beauty of what the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan introduced to the world that day in terms of atonement, reconciliation, and responsibility, primarily for Black men to atone to God, to become one with one another again, and to reconcile differences between ourselves where we have become at odds with one another, and to take responsibility for our communities and for our children and for our wives and for our families, and to take responsibility as men to try to move us along. You know, such a theme was so powerful that, again, you see, even Clinton, you know, it's not like he could come with something different. No, he had to cut and paste and use the terminology that the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan had established as the theme for that day. So they had to copy, because at the end of the day, he couldn't ever come up with anything remotely as powerful as that message that was being conveyed on that day to all of these wonderful brothers who traveled from different parts of the world to be on that mall. And, you know, I find it sad sometimes when I think about how so much of what we take for granted today, you know, I was, before coming on the air just now, I've been struggling with the technology, trying to work out exactly what I'm doing or whatever. But again, in future shows, we might really want to demonstrate and show just how even so much of the modern technology that we use and many of us take for granted today, if it wasn't for us, it wouldn't be here, because it comes from us. So much of the things that we have at our disposal today comes from the genius, comes from the majesty of Black people and our ability to invent and to create and to give to the world things which are beneficial, yet because of the time and the type of circumstances under which we do these things, oftentimes other people are taking credit, and we then think that we are some kind of inferior people, some people who really are using other people's things. You know, you'd be surprised how many of us think like that, like we are actually using somebody else's technology, not realizing that all of this really comes from us. We are the architects, we are the builders, we are those who, without us, there would be no Western Europe as we know it today. There would be no North America as we know it today. There would be none of this infrastructure that is so magnificent, but it really comes from the people who have been made the abject people of the world, the people who have been crushed to the ground, the people who have been denied and been suppressed. We are, in fact, the authors of it all. And so, you know, family, I want us to appreciate that those barbed words from the President of the United States of America were squarely aimed at besmirching the good name and character of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. And as I said, he was attempting and abysmally failing to separate the message from the messenger. Now, I want to see if I can just, let me see if I can share with you, see what we can do. Hope everybody is good. So the Honourable Minister Louis Farrakhan said on the day that it was a day made by God. And I make no apologies for talking about the creator of the heavens and the earth, talking about God, because again, this is who we are. And, you know, we wouldn't even be here in 2021 if it wasn't that as a people, we're so God-centered that that's our reality as a people. We are who we are because of that wonderful power that we have within us. And this show is called Image and Nation because we have the ability, we have the power to see beyond whatever reality currently exists. We have the ability, we have the power to see beyond any barriers that are currently erected before us. And that day, brothers and sisters, that day was a day made by God. It's a day that was really, truly great. It was a day that was the greatest day of the 20th century, where nearly 2 million Black men came out. But again, you know, you will hear about Black people who fought in the Crimea War. I don't know how many of you appreciate that. Not just Black men from America were in Vietnam, but Black men from the Caribbean, Black men from Africa, Black men from Europe were also there. We were in the First World War, we were in the Second World War. We've been in all of the wars fighting for a freedom that we have not yet achieved. But again, these things have to be told today because we don't know. Well, it's the same thing with this magnificent day that took place. The reason why I've got to spend so much time really kind of injecting energy into what happened that day, because if we're not careful, we can think, oh, well, it was just a march. It was just a lightweight thing. No, 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 brothers and sisters. It was much, much bigger than that. It was much more important than that. And the legacy of that day remains with us. And it's important that we know about that day and that we share that reality with our young people, because again, a lot of the young people, they're disappointed today with the so-called elders. They're disappointed with us. They're disappointed with their parents. Why? Because for a lot of them, they actually don't believe that we've done anything. You see, that's again part of the problem. Imagine we're now approaching those months towards that time period that they call Christmas. And how many Black people, if the lorries run and if they can actually get presents, but how many Black people are going to go out and purchase something for their loved ones, for their children or whatever, and then come the day, they're going to pretend or they're going to lie to their children that a big fat white man wearing a red suit came down the chimney and gave them a gift, when in reality that gift comes from their hard-earned money and their time that they gave up in order to earn that money, in order to get that gift for their child. But now they want to give the credit to a fat Caucasian who's coming from Lapland. And I know we think it's, it's no big deal, but you see, our children believe us. Whatever we tell the children actually believe. And again, we give the credit to somebody else. And so the children have no reason to look at us as their benefactor. They look at somebody else as their benefactor. And then some of us may be even shocked that our children are not showing the gratitude to us, but we ourselves have been lying to them. It was a day of peace, love, and harmony. You got to remember, if 10 of us as brothers stand on a street corner having a conversation, people start getting nervous. People get nervous, especially if we maybe huddle together, if we talk quietly among ourselves, if we go into a room as Black people. The amount of times that I've been in meetings with Black people, and then you've got other people looking at us sideways and suspiciously, because why are you all Black together? Why are you all having this meeting? Why is it that we can't come in? You see, they become very nervous, very suspicious, very afraid of just a small group of us gathering together and having our own family type gathering. But again, brothers and sisters, I want you to think about in excess of 1 million Black men in one place on one day. And by the way, spending the entire day, because brothers were arriving there from the night before, but there were brothers there from the very early hours of the morning when the Islamic call to prayer was given and other prayers were said and drumming began and so on and so forth. But it was a whole day event that took place. And it was truly awesome, brothers and sisters. And again, wherever you get crowds of people, you get crime and you get all manner of stuff. But I want you to think about what happened on the 16th of October, 1995, because there was not one reported crime. There was no incidents. There was no acrimony or no upset, and there was no fighting. There was no madness that took place on that day with nearly 2 million Black men in one place. And we're not talking about 2 million men all dressed in nice, neat suits and ties or whatever. There were plenty of those there, but you're talking about so-called gangbangers. You're talking about street people. You're talking about all manner of different types. You're talking about different religions and different ideologies and different political persuasions and different age ranges and age groups. But nonetheless, all of these brothers, all of these men came together and coalesced together on the day. And it was absolutely, truly beautiful. It was a day of peace, love, and harmony. Beloved family, from the president on down, they were so afraid of the potential of that day that the whole of the federal government of the United States of America shut down on that day and ceased to function on Monday, October 16, 1995. The National Guard had been called up and were on standby in tunnels under the Washington Mall, and the Washington, D.C. and Park Police were also on high alert in anticipation of an outbreak of violence with 1 million Black men in the heart of the capital city of the United States of America. That was the anticipation that they had on that day. So what I want to do now, if possible, I just want to have a little break, if we can do that. And then after the break, I want to come back and continue with what we're saying, brothers and sisters. And so let me see if I can go to a break. Just want to do a little advertising here. So here we go. Okay. All right. So that was Nature's Hair Products, and I don't. There should have been some sort of wording with it actually, where you would have seen where to go on Instagram to get more information about that, and where possibly you could make an order for that product. But it's awesome. I don't think really I should be advertising hair stuff, considering, but no, I have it on good authority that it's actually very, very beautiful, and you should try if you can to get some of those products. Now, brothers and sisters, it's really so many groundbreaking and powerful things took place on that day. Like, for instance, the formation of the National African American Leadership Summit, where a leading group of civil rights activists and the Nation of Islam combined, working with scores of civil rights organizations, including many local chapters of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, but not the National NAACP. They actually didn't take part, but many of the, groups from local groups of the NAACP actually took part, but the national organization declined to take part. There was a lot of controversy around this march, and nonetheless it came together and formed the Million Man March organizing committee, which in turn formed organizing committees all over the country. The founder of the National African American Leadership Summit was at the time Dr. Benjamin Chavis Jr., and he served as the national director of the Million Man March. And the committee was instrumental in inviting many prominent speakers to address the Million Man March attendees, including Jesse Jackson was one of those who spoke, Rosa Parks was another, Brother Cornel West, and also Maya Angelou, along with Marion Barry and Kurt Schmoke, who were both of those. That was the mayor of Washington, D.C., and also the mayor of Baltimore, Maryland, respectively. Just to name but a few of the speakers, of which there were very many. But of course, the keynote address and the main message was delivered by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, brothers and sisters. He was the man of the hour who really gave, the people a very phenomenal message on the day. Something for the people to really think about and really contemplate what the day was about and the type of changes that the day was designed to bring about, because it wasn't a protest march to demand necessarily anything from the government, but it was a march really designed for those who attended to take action in and of themselves in such a way that they could bring about change within the Black world, within the Black community, within the framework of the Black family. Because, you know, it's unfortunate, but, you know, again, just recently I've been really looking at some of the things which are going on in places like Chicago, and last year and the year before in this country. I haven't heard as much at the present time in the UK, and I think maybe because of the COVID situation, things have quietened down a little bit, not entirely, but the amount of stabbings and shootings and so-called Black on Black violence that takes place within the inner cities here and in North America, and also on the continent, believe it or not. This is a global thing in the Caribbean, in Trinidad, in Jamaica, in other parts of the world. Wherever we are, there appears to be a kind of implosion taking place, a kind of, it's fratricide, because we fight and we kill one another. We're very disrespectful to one another. There's a huge divide that has been developing, continues to develop, and is very pronounced, this divide between the Black man and the Black woman. We're greatly estranged from one another. We're not necessarily coming together as we ought to. There's a huge divide between the youth and the elders. These are real situations that we're talking about here. And I say all of that to say, you know, brothers and sisters, it's very, very bad. But the reality is that if it wasn't for the Million Man March, it's possible it could now be literally 10 times worse. Because on that day, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan spoke to around 2 million Black men live from the mall. And of course, it was televised, and some of us were in the UK, and we were able to tune in throughout the entire day and take in all of the messages that came, but in particular, the message from the minister. And it was powerful. And then if you imagine, you know, 2 million of us listening to that, and then each of those 2 million maybe talk to 5 other people or talk to 10 other people and convey that type of message, you know, you're talking about a good number of people would have been privy to this concept of atonement, reconciliation, and responsibility, this idea of Black men coalescing once again with one another, falling in love with one another, having a determination to take care of our wives and our children and our families. And so, in my humble opinion, I believe that this message was so powerful that it did permeate all of the communities where we come from as a people. And that despite what we see today, when we're hearing about over a weekend, say in Chicago, literally tens of people being shot, I mean, into the 50s sometimes, 50 people, 60 people shot over a weekend, and maybe out of those 50 people, 14 or 15 actually losing their lives, and the rest of them maimed or injured via gunshot wounds or other types of bodily harm. that's inflicted by us on us. What I'm saying is that despite those statistics today, I believe that it would have been at this point a lot worse had it not been for the Million Man March. The Million Man March sent a message into the Black minds and the Black hearts to really say, look, we need to think again about the way in which we treat one another, think again about the way in which we relate, think again about this concept of atonement, which is a big word, brothers and sisters. It literally means to become one, to come back together, to develop a tone that we can all listen to the same thing, that we can all move on the same level and mean it, atonement, and so I believe that as a result of this phenomenal day that took place, we don't have the level of violence and crime, despite how it looks, that could be simply because we were able at that time to really come back together as a result of the message sent by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan on that day, brothers and sisters. And so, I really hope that it's not lost on us what the minister was able to convey to the brothers and sisters. Because, I think I read one statistic that said that out of the nearly 2 million men that showed up on that day, there may have been as many as 30,000 sisters who just couldn't stay away. And so there were women there, as I said, Maya Angelou and others, there were women speakers on the day as well who spoke to the men, but there were also women some who came with their partners and others who just wanted to be there, had to be there. Some of them were voter registration activists, and they were literally going throughout the crowd and getting people to register to vote and so on and so forth. But, I believe that message was so powerful that it did actually get through to our people. And so I don't want us to underestimate that message that was given on that day. It was also reported, and I have it on good authority, that among the nearly 2 million Black men on the Washington Mall that day was a young, aspiring Barack Hussein Obama. I mean, there were a lot of people. There were a lot of people who were there, and just think about Barack Obama being in that crowd, and how, again, he was influenced. Because you see, I know we're not naive about his presidency, those 2 terms that he had in the White House with his Black family. Not a great deal was done for Black people during his tenure. And in truth, if you study the statistics and you look back, you'll see that during the time of Barack, it was really the time when the killing by police of Black people, those shootings that happened, they really increased on his watch. And it wasn't that he did or created any specific policies that were designed to pull Black people out of a hole. It really wasn't like that. He wasn't the president of Black America. He became the CEO of white supremacy in reality. And they used him. They used him as a face. They put him up front, and that was a trick to make us think that we had arrived. But I did hear the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan say something very profound and very beautiful in relation to that presidency. And you see what it is, brothers and sisters, the minister said that if he did nothing else, what he did was he would have inspired a lot of young people, a lot of young Black boys and Black girls, children, who would then believe that, in fact, there were no barriers, no ceilings to what they could accomplish, in the sense that he aspired to sit in the highest office. They refer to Joe Biden today as the most powerful man in the world. This is what they say. This is not necessarily correct. But my point is that to be the president of the United States of America is a very high office from this world's perspective. And therefore, for him to have that type of aspiration, for him to end up in that place, even though what he was representing wasn't necessarily us, and it certainly wasn't us. The point is that he would have removed a ceiling from the minds of many of the youngsters. So even if he didn't do anything else, the fact that he was able to do that, the fact that he was able to give a different image is actually very, very important, beloved family. So, you know, he was in the crowd, soaking up the atmosphere and also the positive messages of atonement, reconciliation, and responsibility. And one of the principal and high moral subjects that were raised by the minister, by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan on that day, was above all the respect, love, and honor that we should have as brothers in particular for the Black woman and child. That was, you know, that was a theme that ran throughout that day. And I can remember seeing a sister in the crowd when the minister was really talking along those lines, and the smile that was on her face. Because you see, again, we can take these things for granted, but if these things are not said, you'd be surprised how many of us as brothers who have grown up in a world where the abuse of women is kind of normal and kind of standard. So then you end up with a Me Too movement and all kinds of stuff where women feel abused in the workplace and in other environments. They're just not able to move and do the things that their talent and their gifts should allow them to be able to do, without feeling literally like they are prey, and that there are predators who, in one form or another, are gonna try to curtail or stop their growth and development, or even to the point of doing harm. And so, you know, that message that day about the Black woman and child was critically important and very powerful. And you know, there's something I was going to say about that. I'm not going to say it because it's not necessary. So it was just that I know that I heard a very popular song by a very popular rapper, and he completely got it wrong, because the minister talked about us, you know, really not using the B word to describe our female, the Black female, but he said to describe any woman in reality and in truth. But then I heard in the brother's rap, he was, you know, using the B word and mentioning the Million Man March in the same breath. And so I said, wow, you know, some of us, it doesn't matter what kind of warning or what type of guidance we receive, some of us will always end up, it would appear, doing the wrong thing. And so that was one of the more powerful things that happened on that day. That message about the Black woman. One of the main objectives of the day was to show to America and to convey to the world a vastly different picture of the Black male, as depicted in Hollywood movies and in other forms of popular culture. And even on the nightly news, when we're shown as pimps, hustlers, drug or dope fiends, you know, this is, again, a real kind of image that is all pervasive in this world when it comes to Black men. You know, when the idea of the Black man is conjured up in a world like this, mostly it's negative. Mostly it's negative, you know. And then if it's positive, I don't know. Generally, maybe it's sports or something like that. We're sporting icons, but there's very few real positive images of Black men in this world. And then at the same time, even when we do have positive men, what tends to happen is that you find that they're very quickly brought down or crushed in some way, or shown to be other than that image, that projected image of a positive person. You know, the images that we see are constantly those images of Black men being the criminals, being the so-called gangbangers and other forms of criminal types who, you know, we're being set up for slaughter and what's called justifiable homicide at the hands of the police by being so depicted as some kind of maniacal subculture that the world would be better off without. This is the image that the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan really wanted to dispel about the Black man in particular on that day in 1995, October 16th, by really showing a completely different image of us as a people. This was the image, this was the mark, this was the peace sign, this was the joy of brotherhood that ultimately went all around the world, and that was mission accomplished. The Million Man March served to completely obliterate that false media generated and stereotypical images and false narrative about Black men. Because again, you know, many of us start to believe the hype. You know, I can remember growing up as a youngster in the streets of London, and when you're constantly being targeted by the police, in those days we were under what's called a sus law, where you could be arrested as a suspicious person just for walking down the road, and then they would put trumped up charges on you, and before you knew it, you could be before a magistrate or some other form of court, and then you can be, they would call it verbal, you would be verbaled by the police. They would say that you said something to incriminate yourself. Sometimes we did, because we were naive to that type of trickery that these people would use, and we could literally end up in some type of detention, ball stall, prison, on the basis of just being a suspected person. And this happened day in and day out, and generations of us were criminalized, and those criminal convictions then would follow you all the days of your life, making it very, very difficult for you to get a mortgage or to just do normal so-called mainstream things. And this was a deliberate policy. This was similar, not dissimilar to the hostile environment that the government again created around those of us who come from the Caribbean in order to deny us any type of stability, security when it comes to our immigration status, despite the fact that Britain colonized the areas and the lands where we came from, and that we were in fact citizens when we came here prior to the 70s and the early 80s. But nonetheless, racism, institutional racism was such, still remains, disguised somewhat, was such that it was designed to criminalize a whole generations of people to stop us ever from meeting our aspirations and our goals to become the great people that we were born into the world to be. So these are the types of things that we're constantly and have been constantly fighting against. And again, the Million Man March was designed to address a lot of these issues and to give a different image of the Black man, because the minister knows and knew that we are not as we are depicted. We are not those negative, disruptive killers and pimps and thieves and vagabonds and the bogeyman of the society. We're really not those people. But as I said, me growing up and constantly being targeted in that way, I can remember clearly at a certain point in my life where I began to believe that I was that person. And then I would start to act out and play the role of the villain, play the role of the bad man, play the role. And this is what happens in the so-called inner cities in America, in the UK, and in other parts of the world. When you oppress a people to the point and keep a people poverty-stricken and keep a people basically turning inward on themselves and seeing themselves in the mirror and hating what they see, because these people are not having the opportunities to be able to really express their God-given nature and character, then what happens to such people is oftentimes they will adopt that dog eat dog, that crab in a barrel, that type of kill or be killed type of mentality. It's manufactured. It's not natural. The way in which many of us as a people live today is not a natural way. It is a manufactured condition and situation that many of us find ourselves in. And as a result of that, this is why you have the type of crimes and things of that nature taking place within the Black communities in this world. And so, the minister, by calling for 1 million men to come to Washington, was really trying to get us en masse to really see that we were not those people and that we could make a difference. And I believe that those nearly 2 million men who showed up, when they went back to their places of abode, when they went back into the communities, that they did actually, many hundreds of thousands of these men did actually begin to make a difference. And the whole world was able to witness the largest and the most peaceful gathering of any group of men, much less Black men, in the history of America and the world, with not one incident of crime or violence reported throughout the entire day. On this day, men hoisted other men's children, passing them overhead to get them to the toilets, and then passed them back again gently and with loving care and safety. These are the types of things that were going on the day, passing the children overhead. Boxes of money for charity were collected and passed from hand to hand overhead among thousands of men in the same way. Long lost family members and friends were reunited after years of being apart and not speaking to one another. They came together, beloved family, on that day. Black men from all over North America, the Caribbean, and other far-flung parts of the Black world converged on Washington, D.C. in order to hold hands with complete strangers, but who each one knew instinctively, nonetheless, that we were brothers. And they came together and we prayed together on that day. Black men came together to unite in self-help and self-defense against economic and social ills plaguing the so-called African-American community and the wider Black world community. The march itself took place in the context of a larger kind of grassroots movement that set out to win politicians' attention for urban and minority issues through the launching of a widespread voter registration campaign. This was one of the main aims, and in particular to get more Black people to register to vote as independent voters and not just give their votes away to the Democrats or Republican parties while receiving literally nothing in return, but instead creating an independent voting bloc of Black people who would then have leverage in power to make demands on any political candidates of any color or party who would enact and carry out policies that benefited our communities. That was the voter registration aim and objective. Monday, October 16th, 1995 was also called the Day of Absence, and which was mostly organized by women, by sisters, in conjunction with the march leadership, and which was intended to engage the large population of Black Americans in particular, who would not be able to attend the demonstration in person in Washington on that day. On this date, which was declared to be a holy day and a Black holiday of absence called the Holy Day of Atonement. And then on all subsequent October 16th, Black people in America and throughout the world have been encouraged to stay home from their usual school and work and all of the kind of normal social engagements, and literally not spending money on that day, and be more in favor of attending like teachings and worship services, focusing on our God and the struggle for a healthy and self-sufficient Black family structure and strong communities. This is what, since 1995, this is what myself and my personal family have attempted to do on, not every single one, I don't think we've managed, but mostly on the 16th of October each year. That's the Day of Atonement. It's the day of absence where we don't work and we don't spend money. And it's a day when we try as a family to atone with one another, and not just the internal family, but if you have issues with somebody on the outside, it's a good time. It's a good day to make a phone call. It's a good day to maybe even make a visit and try to reconcile differences with that person. Try to come together and squash any beefs, to use that terminology, to come together and try to, bring atonement to the fore, bring this unity back, and to try to atone for any wrongs that we may have done to one another. That's the day each year, which is a holy day, a day of absence from the normal day-to-day things that people would do, where that day is a day for prayer, it's a day for meditation, it's a day to really, do something different. That's a quiet day. That's a day to really contemplate where we are in the world and where we're going in the world, and to reset attitudes, because the world is such a place. It can be so busy. We can be so busy that we can forget sometimes to stop and calibrate just where we are. I'm using a couple of machines here. Obviously, we have vehicles, cars, or whatever, and we have to get them serviced. Beloved family, we have to, make sure that the antivirus on the computer is up to date, and so on and so forth. There's so many things that needs to be calibrated to make sure that they are functioning as they ought to, you know, the watch on our wrist, you know, everything. And unfortunately, we do tend to do this with all of the machines and all of the material items in our lives. But how many of us do that with ourselves? How many of us are really reflecting on the foods that we're putting into our bodies? Is what we're eating, is it really in conjunction? Is there congruity between what we're consuming and the health of the body? Are we putting death into our systems, or are we putting life into our systems? And these things, like I said, you know, you got people who work and they're in a vehicle all day long, driving, delivering, or whatever. They're up and down, and so they grab something quick from one of these fast food joints or whatever, and they may do that for 3 months straight. But think about the damage that is being done in that time. And so there are particular times and particular days in a year when we should take time out, family, to contemplate what we are doing and to take careful note of things like consumption, and make sure that we reset, that we, you know, recalculate where we are in this life. And one of the great days to do this is the 16th of October. That is the holy day. We are literally 2 days away, and it's now going to be 26 years since the Million Man March, the Day of Atonement, reconciliation, and responsibility. And I would encourage all of us, because remember, if you decide that on Saturday, I believe it is, the Holy Day of Atonement, if you decide that on Saturday that you're going to observe that day, remember, you're not going to be observing that day in isolation. There'll be a few 100,000 of us around the world doing exactly the same thing. On that day, it's also a day for fasting. It's a day where you really, from sun up to sundown, you don't consume anything. Of course, you may have a drink. You should have a drink. It's not like Ramadan where we have no liquids as well. But on that day, it'd be a wonderful thing to just go the entire day. You know, now in the world, they love to talk about intermittent fasting. And they, you know, if they go 3 hours without food, they classify that as a fast. But I would suggest that on that day, that when the sun comes up on that day, you stop eating, and then you don't eat again on that day till the sun goes down. That gives you a good, clear, I don't know, 10, 12, 13 hours or whatever. That's a wonderful thing to do, brothers and sisters. And by the way, on the issue of fasting, when we learn to fast, and by the way, fasting is a prescription. Fasting is something that when you study it, you'll find that all of the great sages, all of the prophets, all of the great men and women, the seers, the tellers, all of the people, great people of history fasted. They understood the medicinal nature of fasting. They understood the prescription of fasting and how that in and of itself is a healer. The Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad said to us, those of us in the Nation of Islam, that fasting will cure 95% of our ills. Just think about that one. See, because have you ever wondered why when you get sick, you one of the first things that happens is you go off your food? Because you're not to put food into your system necessarily when you are trying to heal, when you're trying to get better. And if you observe animals, for instance, when they're ill, they don't eat. you see, or if they do eat, they'll eat a particular type of food. They'll go to grass and things of that nature, something in nature that they know will either cause them to bring up the thing that's disturbing their health, or would help to create the appropriate chemicals that would then go toward their healing. And so this is a day. The reason I'm talking about this day is because I understand from my perspective how powerful and important a day it is in history, and how important it is to all of us today, and that we should, if we can, try to observe the Holy Day of Atonement, reconciliation, and responsibility. We should commemorate the Million Man March, just the idea of that type of unity, because again, unfortunately, we are a very disunited people, and in unity, there is strength. In the Black community in the UK, we're very weak because we don't do collective action. We don't come together. And I'm appealing to all of the brothers in particular, but brothers and sisters generally, that we must unite. We must come together. We must, as a people, recognize the kind of strength that we have when we are a unified people, when we have what you might refer to as self-interest, because everyone else has self-interest. We're the only people that can be identified on this planet, in this country, who negate to have self-interest, collective self-interest. Of course, we've become very individualized now, and we think that's the way forward. We think, oh, that's, you know, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm going to do my own thing. Yeah, that's fine, beloved brothers and sisters. But in reality, as an individual, you can only do so much, and you can only go so far. But when we come together as a brotherhood and a sisterhood, when we have that collective self-interest, we become formidable, and our enemies have to then deal with us in a different way. You can command respect. You don't have to demand anything from anybody. You don't have to beg anybody for anything. But when you are a unified people, you can command respect. See, there's a difference between demanding respect and commanding respect. You command it by the fact that you are strong together, that you've got backup, that as a people, we're not, you know, individuals waiting to be picked off by an enemy who is always united. The enemy is always united. And when he speaks, he uses the language of unity. We are the only ones who think that we are going to be able to, you know, get through as individuals. It really, really doesn't work like that. And further, the organizers of the Day of Absence wanted to demonstrate to the powers that be the critical importance of the social, political, and economic presence of Black people to their society. And in our absence on such a day, there's a profound impact, brothers and sisters. You know, don't think that a day of absence of Black people is a lightweight thing. And again, these are things which have been muted historically. We've kind of spoken about it a little bit. And if you study history, you'll see that we did do things of that nature in the past, the Bristol bus boycott and so on and so forth. When we didn't show up to work, or when we didn't show up to use those buses, they ground to a halt, because again, we have that kind of power. So when we talk about a day of absence, imagine all the Black people in the UK agreed to a day of absence, that we would not go to work on that day, that we would not show up to shop on that day, that we would not show up to do anything on that day. within their society, believe me, it would have a tremendous impact on the economy and also on other stratas of life. It would have a profound impact. If only more of us knew the power of our unified action and how easily we could affect social, political, and economic change to our advantage by such action as a day of absence. The Million Man March spawned many events in its aftermath that attempted to emulate the majesty and the success of that great day, like the Million Women's March that took place 2 years later, the Million Youth March, and numerous other Million Man marches from Egypt to Indonesia, but none like the original October 16th, 1995 Day of Atonement, Reconciliation and Responsibility, and of course, the Million Man March. Now, brothers and sisters, something very, very profound took place on that day with the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan really doing something that was very powerful. And a part of the October 16th, 1995 Million Man March and its theme of atonement, reconciliation, and responsibility was what's called the 8 steps of atonement. The real spirit of the Million Man March was captured when the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan asked the brothers on the mall to recite a powerful pledge of commitment and intention after the march was over. It was really designed for all of us, whether we were there or not. If we understand that pledge, and if we were to carry that pledge into practice, that alone is something that we could then build a moral and very powerful foundation basis to our lives on that pledge that was given on that day. So we'll come to that. But before that, I wanted to just take us really quickly through the 8 steps of atonement that we were given on that day. And the first one is to point out the wrong. I mean, you know, I could talk on this for an hour, 2 hours. I'm not going to do that. But somebody has to be willing to point out the wrong. And believe it or not, there's a lot of us, we won't do that. We won't point out wrong, or if we do point out wrong, we tend to do it from a perspective of being holier than thou, like, oh, well, we've never done any wrong. And maybe we're quick to point out somebody else's wrong, but it's really not like that. It's just being willing, when you see something is wrong, when you know something is wrong, somebody has to be prepared to highlight that reality if it is the case that we want to rectify that wrong. You can't see something is wrong, ignore it, pretend that it's okay, and somehow things is going to work itself out. You know, an alcoholic, one of the first requirements of an alcoholic who wants to cease being an alcoholic is that when they go to AA or whatever the institution that they go into to look at their alcoholism, one of the first things that has to happen is that alcoholic has to say, my name is Brother Leo, I'm an alcoholic. That's the beginning. You've got to point out the wrong. You've got to recognize first and foremost that something is wrong. The next step is acknowledgement of the wrong, because again, somebody can point out something is wrong and we can just be in denial. Most of us, as soon as somebody comes to us to say something is wrong, we get defensive. And so, there is an aspect to this which says we must not be defensive. We must not be in denial. We must be willing to acknowledge. See, without acknowledgement, I remember Tony Blair, Tony the liar, Blair, liar, being in denial about our enslavement and the issue of reparations, because he don't want to deal with reparations. He didn't want to deal with reparations when Brother Bernie Grant posed the question to him in Parliament. He blustered and flustered all over the place and basically attempted to suggest that, well, because in the time when we were being enslaved, it wasn't illegal. I beg your pardon, Mr. Blair liar. There was never a time, even though wicked people may write into their own legislation a justification for the enslavement or the dehumanization of another human being, that's never a legal or lawful act when it comes to the laws of God. But there was a denial and a lack of acknowledgement by Blair, the liar, and all of them in truth. And so therefore, even a process of atonement cannot even begin, simply because somebody's pointing out a wrong that was done, but in the absence of an acknowledgement of that wrong, you can't even make progress. And so again, a lot of our people, we're quick to want to forgive our enemies and forgive those who have done evil against us. But how can you forgive somebody and they're not even willing to acknowledge that they did something in the first place? See, this is where we go wrong. We're so quick to say, oh, I forgive you. But what are you forgiving? If they have not even, at the end of the apartheid regime in South Africa, they had this truth and reconciliation thing going on. A lot of the perpetrators, a lot of these evil racist killers of our people during that era of apartheid didn't even acknowledge the process. They said, we're not taking part, you see, and we accepted that and we allowed them to be able to do that. And so no wonder in 2021, rapidly approaching 2022, the vast majority of Black people in South Africa to this day are still living in absolute poverty and degradation, while the small minority who were the apartheid architects still live in high-rise luxury in South Africa. This has to be addressed because, you see, the process of atonement means that somebody has to point out the wrong, somebody has to acknowledge the wrong, and then they have to go further. Point 3 says you have to confess the fault. First, you might want to do it to God. That's a good place to start. They say confession is good for the soul, for your soul, for my soul. If I can admit to myself my wrong, and then you have to then admit the wrong to those who you have wronged. You see, this is the process of atonement that the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan gave us on October 16, 1995, the most powerful, beautiful, and profound day in the history of the 20th century. Number 4, repentance. See, a feeling of remorse or contrition or shame. In many of the recent demonstrations in the streets, you can hear the people chanting to the police and chanting to the government, shame on you, shame on you. No, 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 no. See, you can chant that, but these people don't feel no shame. Point number 4 means that you have to feel remorse or contrition or shame but they don't feel no shame. So you see, with some people, you're really just wasting your time. But if you find somebody who's willing to repent, to say, you know what, I really did wrong, I really messed up, and I do feel remorse. I am upset and sad about what I did. There is contrition, there is shame for the past conduct, which was wrong and sinful. When you can recognize that, because, you know, some of us, we're so perfect in the outlook that we have of ourselves, and we're so far removed from perfection in reality. And you notice, I'm not saying you, I'm saying we, because all of us are in that same condition. There is none righteous, so to speak. I think there's a scripture that says that if God was to punish humanity for their sins, for our sins, not one soul would be left alive. Talking to you imams, talking to you bishops, talking to you high potentates in religion who think that you're so holy, there is not one. Not one, brothers and sisters. We all need to repent. We all need to have that feeling of remorse and contrition and shame for the past conduct, which was wrong or sinful, because we've all been there. And then the fifth step is actually atonement. That's where we tune up now and come into that at-one-ment, that atonement, meaning to make amends and reparations for the wrong. See, you crash into my car, the back of my car on the road, the highway code says that you're in the wrong. And if you refuse to pay for the damage to my car, either out of your pocket or via your insurance, whatever, then that feeling of hurt and that feeling of damage and that feeling of disrepair not going away until you have made reparatory justice, reparations for that damage, for that hurt, for that harm that was done. And you know, the reality of what happened to us as a people over 400 years, that's not no lightweight thing. I think it was just today, I read where somebody wrote, you know, that when slavery ended, that there was no therapy for the formerly enslaved. There was no real reparations for the mind and the heart of those who had been so traumatized over so many generations. And do we think that in the absence of that type of repair, that that's something that we can just disregard and just forget? Do we not understand such a thing as genetic memory, and that the legacy of all of that is still with us? And every generation that we give birth to new children, those children have that trauma in their DNA. And that at some point that has to be addressed, that these types of issues have to be part of the repair process. And that's how you get to at-one-ment, atonement. That's how you get to that point where you can make amends, where you can mend that which was broken. But in the absence of that process, the person remains broken. They may plaster over the cracks and they may look good on the surface, and they may be able to bluff and bluster through and pretend that everything is all right. But the reality is, my dear family, that atonement has to be a part of this process of repair. And point number six says, forgiveness by the offended party to cease to feel offense and resentment against another for the harm done. You see, when you've gone through all of those steps, there comes a point where, having been offended, I have to stop feeling offense. I have to be willing to forgive. I have to be willing to move on with my life and not continue feeling resentment to the degree where that resentment is eating me up, where that feeling of being harmed is no longer my predominant thought process, because that's now past, because those other steps have been made in order to repair that. You know, there's a prayer that Christians say, and we should all say the same prayer. In that prayer, it says, and forgive us for our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Listen to the language. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. See, it's reciprocal. We can't be asking or expecting forgiveness. All of us want to be forgiven. All of us want to be forgiven for the things that we've done. All of us are seeking the forgiveness of God for the things that we have done. But how can you expect to be forgiven if you can't forgive? Because, you know, some people, I ain't forgive nobody. This is the mentality, the philosophy, but it don't work, brothers and sisters. See, as much as we want to be forgiven and to put that thing that happened so long ago by the side and away and thrown into the river of forgetfulness, as I think one scripture says, we equally must be prepared to forgive if the person who is deserving of our forgiveness is prepared to go through those steps of acknowledgement, confession, repentance, remorse, contrition, atonement, reparations, forgiveness. It's very, very critically important. Number 7 says reconciliation and restoration, meaning to become friendly and peaceable again. Isn't that beautiful? See, you see, okay, some of us say, okay, we go through, you know, all right, well, I forgive you, but when I'll talk to you, you see, I understand. I've forgiven you, and let's forget it. And okay, it's all good now or whatever, but I'll never have nothing to do with you again. Well, sometimes that's understandable, I guess, but really, what you really want is a situation where that man and that woman, they once declared undying love for one another. And they even had a child or children together. And then at a certain point in time, because of whatever reason, they fell out and it became acrimonious, and it became hateful. And they really did not like each other, get on. They did not get on. They no longer could be peaceable together. But then at a certain point, they made a determination to go through these steps and to really try to reconcile, because you see, you know, brothers and sisters, if you understand what took place over many, 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 many years between the British and the Irish and the so-called troubles in Northern Ireland, where the British government would kill Irish Catholics, and some of the Irish Protestants would be with the British government against Catholics, and Catholics were against Protestants, and Catholic Irish were against British people and the British government, and there was warfare, and there was bombing, and there was shooting, and there was killing on either side. And sometimes the Irish even got over here in London and set off bombs over here, and there were frame-ups, and people went to prison for crimes that they didn't commit and died in prison, and all manner of stuff, and rivers of blood. But at a certain point in time, they sat down and they determined to make peace. What they called the Northern Ireland peace agreement or whatever. And there are many instances of former enemies becoming friends over and after rivers of blood. So, you know, because I know some of us, we just love to hate. But remember, the person that you hate, it's not even over or because of rivers of blood. It's an argument over some infraction, over some slight, over some wicked thing that the other person did to you. They betrayed your trust, they betrayed your love, they cheated on you, they stole your money, whatever it may be. What I'm saying is, at a certain point in time, you go through the process, the 8 steps of atonement. And that man and that woman, see, if they can see the bigger picture, because they have a child or children together. And when men and women break up in relationships, for instance, the people who suffer the most in most instances are the children, because the children are then forced to begin to make choices between mom and dad and all this kind of stuff. When in reality, if the right steps were taken with the right attitude and the determination to atone and to reconcile and to restore and to become friendly and peaceable again, many former enemies like that can find themselves in relationships and situations where now you can greet that person along with their new partner in their life and be friendly and peaceable. You can find yourself going to the same theater or going to the same restaurant or sharing time together because one day you're taking care of the children, the next day she's taking care of the children, and you can reconcile. Reconciliation is really, really important, and restoration and becoming friendly and peaceable again should be an aim and an objective in all of our lives when we are trying to resolve these types of arguments and problems which have festered maybe for a long time. And so, beloved family, finally, we come to the last stage, and that stage, number 8, is perfect union with Allah, God, perfect union with God, and perfect union with each other. It's achievable. That can be done. I know we may have given up on the idea of perfection. There's a scripture in the Bible that says, "Be ye perfect, even as I am," Jesus talking. And perfection is something that we shouldn't necessarily scoff at in terms of being able to be a person who strives for excellence. Excellence in terms of what we're able to do, the things that we're able to achieve, and even excellence in how we relate to another human being. And so I'm saying, you know, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan gave us these 8 steps of atonement, and I'm saying that they're very important, and you should examine them and look at them in light of how you are relating to family members, friends, and, you know, others who today you may classify as an enemy. But really, again, like I said, if you examine how you became enemies, it may not be quite as serious as you think. And it may be that you could actually have a union with that person. You could actually be at one with that person. And if you can first think about becoming more at one with God, and when we say God, we're not talking about a spook God floating around in the sky. The God we're talking about resides within here. The God we're talking about is a God, a personal relationship that we have to have with that leader within ourselves, that thought process, that mind of God, which if we would only allow him, he would dwell in here, in his temple, this what we call the temple, and we could have at one unity with God himself, and we could have that with other people as well, brothers and sisters. So in closing, we are almost at the end, and I just wanted to say to us that the other thing that took place, I mentioned it before briefly, the other thing that took place on the day, which was extremely powerful, was the pledge that the men took with the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan on the day. And again, if we study the pledge and try to make that pledge something, especially brothers, that we would live by, then we can begin a process of really changing the condition of our lives, changing the way others view us. I'm a big emphasizer of change. And we live in a world where they say change is inevitable, where they say that the one constant in life is change. But then they equally say that the thing that people hate the most is change. The thing that people are afraid of the most is change. And so I would challenge all of us to challenge ourselves, to examine ourselves and ask ourselves, can I change? Can I make changes? Because if you can change, beloved family, you can achieve tremendous things in this life. We all can. And so I would encourage change. And so I want us to go through the pledge, and then we will wrap up. And I really want to thank all of you for tuning in and for being with me and spending this time with me this evening. I hope, as I said, I'm still trying to learn. I'm scared to death. I'm in trepidation about this technology. I was all over the place just trying to start. I think I had two things playing at once. I didn't know what was going on. But the people who love me and care for me and encourage me, they've been telling me, Leo, just do it, just do it. It's been literally years that I'm supposed to be doing this because I get a lot of requests from people in different parts of the world who want me to share with them some of these life-giving teachings that I've been blessed to learn. And so that's the motivation, brothers and sisters, to really try to help myself and others to really come to terms with this life and to really begin to excel in this life and to overcome problems and obstacles and whatever. And so let's share the pledge together, and then we will begin to close down for the evening.
Now, brothers, in closing, I want you to take this pledge. When I say I want you to say I, and I'll say your name. I know that there's so many names, but I want you to shout your name out so that the ancestors can hear it. Take this pledge with me. Say with me, please. I say your name. Pledge that from this day forward, I will strive to love my brother as I love myself. I say your name. From this day forward, will strive to improve myself spiritually, morally, mentally, socially, politically, and economically, for the benefit of myself, my family, people. I say your name. Pledge that I will strive to build business, build houses, build hospitals, build factories, and enter into international trade for the good of myself, my family, and my people. I say your name. Pledge that from this day forward, I will never raise my hand with a knife or a gun to beat, cut, or shoot any member of my family or any human being except in self-defense. I say your name. Pledge from this day forward, I will never abuse my wife by striking her, disrespecting her, for she is the mother of my children and the producer of my future. I say your name. Pledge that from this day forward, I will never engage in the abuse of children, little boys or little girls, for sexual gratification. But I will let them grow in peace to be strong men and women for the future of our people. I say your name. Will never again use the B word to describe any female, but particularly my own black sister. I say your name. Pledge from this day forward that I will not poison my body with drugs or that which is destructive to my health and my well-being. I say your name. Pledge from this day forward, I will support black newspapers, black radio, black television. I will support black artists who clean up their acts to show respect for themselves and respect for their people and respect for the ears of the human family. I say your name. Will do all of this. So help me God. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. That means
Yes, brothers and sisters, the minister is about to say that means God is the greatest. And so thank you all so very much. I hope that something that was shared today was of benefit, was of interest, and that, you know, the Imagination show is just starting out. We're just finding our feet, finding our way. And we hope and pray that we will be blessed to have many subject matters that are designed to help us to be able to envision, to be able to see, and to be able to bring about those things that we can envision and those things that we can see and bring them into reality. The legacy of the Million Man March, the offspring of the Million Man March, is the Million Family March, and also the Millions More movement. And these were held respectively on October the 16th, 2000, which was the 5th anniversary of the Million Man March, and on Friday, October the 14th, 2005, which was the 10th anniversary of the Million Man March. And so in conclusion, you know, when we reflect on what we've gained from the millions who have marched and the millions of words that have been spoken, it is abundantly clear that a great foundation and blueprint to image a nation and ultimately build a nation consisting of people who are God-centered has been laid by our leader, teacher, and guide, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. And so, beloved family, I really want to thank you for those of you who have managed to stay the time with me today. And I look forward to seeing you all again next week. I'm just wondering if there are any comments, is there anything in the chat that I'm getting fists, somebody's showing some fists, fantastic. I like that.
Sister Juliet said, thank you, Brother Leo, great teaching.
Okay, so Sister Juliet says, thank you, Brother Leo, great teachings. Nature's Hair Product Instagram has been put in there. Greetings, Brother Leo and brothers and sisters, from Patricia G. Brother Victor says, that's right, brother, that's a great place to start. First, confess to Allah God. Beautiful. Juliet says, thank you, Brother Leo, great teaching. Yep, presentation of the Million Man March, 1995. Juliet says, we should never give up. A peaceful march with no anger or protest. Mr. P would be amazed. What an amazing image of the march. DJ, Mr. P, Juliet, with the exception of the Million Man March, when we march, I don't think we achieve much at all. And, you know, I would even tend to agree with that, you know, Mr. P. I think that's the comment from Mr. P. See, because again, you see, what is the intention of the march? The Million Man March was never really a march that was designed to appeal to governments, to change or whatever. The Million Man March was about us gathering together to make changes ourselves. And that is why I would agree with that statement from our brother. It was very, very powerful, because it was really about us and our power that we have when we come together. It says, somebody says, Juliet says, we need to have more marches of our people to confirm our unity as a people. 1995 was a long time ago. Well, there have been a number of follow-ups to that event. Says, greetings, brothers and sisters. Welcome to Image a Nation. Presents Leo Muhammad Speaks. That's from ourselves. Yes, Leo, good to see you again, my brother. Greetings, Brother Leo. So yes, family, thank you so much. I don't know how many people were looking on YouTube, but we did go live on YouTube. I'm going to learn how to go live simultaneously on YouTube and also on Facebook and the other platforms. And as I said, we intend to have, you know, this meeting on a weekly basis, and we're going to deal with some very, very powerful and some very heavy subjects as we go along. But for now, unless there's anyone who wanted to just say a quick word, then we're going to close out. And I just want to thank you for honoring me by spending this time. And I look forward to seeing you all again of speaking to you all again very soon. So I want to greet you, my beloved family, as I found you in the greeting words of peace. We say it in the ancient tongue of Arabic, Assalamu alaikum, which simply means peace be unto you. And I wish you a wonderful evening, the remainder of your evening. May God bless and protect and keep you and your families. Take care. Let's have a look. See if I can play you something to go out with. Yeah, let's play this.
Now this one's entitled One Voice. No matter where I go, everybody's answering the same questions.
What's next, brother?
What's next, brother? After the marching and the protesting, what's next?
What's next, people?
Well, this is what's next. See, all we need is one voice talking. We've been screaming for justice since the slave ships were brought in. Now the world's caught wind of what it's like when the system's racist and you're black and you're caught in it. No matter which patch I go, up and down the country, it's beautiful seeing black businesses grow. The same questions on everybody's lips. After the march and protesting, then what's next, brother? That's why we need one voice, a nationwide collaboration, and really we got no choice, because they love to see us scattered and separated. We know unity is where power is generated. Trying to line it up for the next those melanated. When we get together, Lord knows we know they hate it. We've been on the ropes like ducking and we're weaving it. We could barely cope, but we just kept breathing. It's time to punch back, let's go. I'm flipping everything. Soul's on fire right now. I'm spitting everything. Every black business I know, I'm linking everything. North, south, east and west, Donnie, just bring it in. We frustrated, no doubt, because up until now we couldn't see our way out. If you really want to fight to change the system around, this is what Badder's about, only the time is now. One voice, one voice.
All we need to slow down see.
One voice, one voice.
We'll be marching through these streets.
One voice, one voice.
Mother voices,
I
mad.
swear this pain so deep.
One voice, one voice.
To all my people.
All we do is one voice for the youth.
One
They ain't got
voice.
many options if we're really gonna speak the truth. We're quick to say they're rude. But if you listen a little closer, there's pain in his attitude. My younger, you ain't gotta fight your brother. Let's take that energy and both fight the government. Young sister, you ain't gotta be no IG model. Don't you know the crew got you, sister? Give her a cuddle. Everybody gotta die someday. What's your purpose, Don? Mine's my kid's future to make sure the hurt is gone. Hot plate of truth is the platter that I'm serving. Think I'm standing by and watching these murders going on. So all community leaders, all public speakers, all master teachers, anybody with influence, chat to your people. Malcolm X was the preview, this is a sequel. By any means necessary, fight for my people. Look how much Marcus Garvey did without no streaming. I'm steaming, ancestors, no more dreaming. We can unite the whole of the people with one voice, one voice.
All we need to slow these seas.
One voice, one voice.
We'll be marching through these streets.
One voice, one voice.
I swear this pain so deep.
One voice, one voice.
To all my people.
One voice, one voice.
All we need is all these seas.
One voice, one voice.
We'll be marching through these streets.
One voice, one voice.
I swear this pain so deep.
One voice, one voice.
To all my people.
To all my people, we just need one voice to bring it all together. All that hard work that we've been doing, it's time to unify the team now. Brother Leo, this is what we're doing. It's a unification team.
Come on, one voice.
Everybody out here, it's one voice.